So what can the U.S. do to push back against Chinese aggression? With me now, Senior Research Fellow with Heritage's Asian Studies Center, Dean Cheng. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you for having me.
So I know every nation has simulations for all sorts of possibilities. So the fact that China has an attack plan against Guam isn't shocking by itself. But since the Chinese Air Force released this video instead of it being leaked, all full of propaganda, am I right to be concerned that this is a warning or should be seen as a threat?
Certainly, it's meant to be a brushback pitch aimed at the United States. The Chinese are very, very unhappy at the moment because a very senior ranking State Department official, the highest ranking in over 20 years, has visited Taiwan. And from the Chinese perspective, this is part of their overall pushback aimed at the United States.
And so speaking of Taiwan, we saw over the weekend, like you were saying, State Department officials were visiting. And we saw, I believe, China sent as many as 18, maybe 20 warplanes overhead through Taiwan's airspace as a show of force. And Taiwan today now responding, saying that they have every right to self-defense against China's harassment and aggression. Are you concerned that there could be conflict there?
Absolutely. Now, it is important to recognize that the Chinese fighters crossed the midline of the Taiwan Straits, but they didn't overfly Taiwan. Had they done that, I suspect we might find ourselves already in a shooting war. But the Chinese absolutely, this was a clear show of force. It's clearly meant to intimidate Taiwan. It's also, however, meant to signal again to the United States, China has the potential of seizing the initiative. They are, of course, less than 100 miles away. And this is also a warning to the U.S. Back off in your support for Taiwan.
And this all comes during the COVID-19 pandemic, of which it appears to be China is using this to further their goals. We see them, going through Hong Kong. We see them provoking skirmishes along their shared border with India. We see them, they were hogging up PPE in the beginning and then selling it overpriced to countries such as Italy and Spain. So what do you think their overall goal is with all this aggression? We also see them taking a bigger role at the UN, for example, and the WHO.
Well, I think it was an American leader who once said, never let a crisis go to waste. So I think the Chinese absolutely are following in those footsteps. I think that they're hitting multiple different audiences at the same time. Part of it is the domestic audience. China's economy seems to have slowed, partly due to COVID, but more importantly due to the lack of domestic reforms. China is also clearly trying to intimidate and put all of its neighbors on their back foot. With the WHO, the Chinese are also, again, showing their muscle. They are basically saying the WHO, an international organization, will dance to our tune. Bringing it back to Taiwan, one of the things they did was they got the WHO to ignore warnings from Taiwan about COVID and how dangerous it was. And there's never been an apology either from the WHO or the Chinese for this.
Now, there's a lot to think about there. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dean.
Thank you for having me.